Hey girls, I wanted to give you some explanation and give you the answers for the last warm-up that you all did with the square root property and completing the square. So on this first one, when you have x squared minus 24 equals 0, we can add 24 to both sides. So we get x squared equals 24, and then we can take the square root of both sides, so we get x is plus or minus the square root of 24. But we can't leave it like that because 24 does have a factor that's a perfect square, which is 4, and we know 4 times 6 gives us 24, so we know our final answer is going to be x equals plus or minus 2 times the square root of 6. In this next one, on number 2, it's already set up for us where we can easily just go on straight on and take the square root of both sides. So when we take the square root of both sides, we have x minus 5. Now when you take the square root of 49, that's a perfect square, but it does give us the answer of plus or minus 7. And because we've got both rational numbers here, we don't have any radicals, we can combine a 5 and a 7 together. So we end up making two equations. One, x minus 5 equals that positive 7, and the other is going to be x minus 5 equals negative 7. And now we just want to solve each one of these. So if we add 5 to both sides, one of our options is x equals 12, and then our other solution here, when we add 5 to both sides, we see that x equals negative 2. So now let's look at the final two problems where we are going to have to complete the square. Remember, when completing the square, we need to have the constant on the other side of the equation and our variable terms on the other side. So we're going to start with this x squared minus 6x, and I'm going to leave a big space, and it equals negative 3. So I'm going to take that coefficient of the x term, that 6, I'm going to divide that by 2, which gives me 3, and I'm going to square that 3. So 3 squared, which gives me 9. And 9 is what I'm going to add to both sides of my equation. So now what I've done is set up a situation on this left-hand side where I have a perfect square trinomial, where x squared minus 6x plus 9 is a perfect square trinomial. And if I factor that, that factors into x minus 3 in parentheses squared. And then on the right-hand side, that's just going to equal negative 3 plus 9, which just gives us 6. So now I'm in a situation where I can use that square root property. I can take the square root of both sides, and so on the left-hand side, I get x minus 3, and on the right-hand side, I get plus or minus the square root of 6. Now I just need to solve for x, so I'll add 3 to both sides of the equation, and I get x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 6, and that's going to be my answer. So now let's look at the final one. And again, here we want to keep our x terms on one side of the equation and move any constants over the other side. So to do that, we're going to subtract 6 from both sides, and so we're left with x squared plus 8x equals negative 6. And so now we need to complete the square over on this left side. So we're going to take 8 and divide it by 2, which gives us 4, and then we're going to square 4, which gives us 16. And we're going to add 16 to both sides of the equation, which gives us that perfect square trinomial on the left-hand side that we can factor, and in this case it's going to factor into x plus 4 in parentheses squared, and that's going to equal 10. So now again we can use the square root property at this point where we can take the square root of both sides. So we're left with x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 10, and we can't simplify that square root of 10 because 10 is not a perfect square and it does not have a factor that's a perfect square. So now we're just going to subtract 4 from both sides so we can get x all by itself. So we find that x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 10. So hopefully this helps. If you missed anything on the warm-up, on this particular warm-up, please know that I will be available on Friday to answer any questions as you are ensuring that you understand all the material as we head into the quiz next week. Thank you.